You know, in this business of trading, the market doesn't care what you want. It never has, and it never will. That's the first thing you have to pound into your head if you expect to last. The market isn't your friend, and it isn't your enemy either. It's just there. It moves up, it moves down, it hesitates, it fakes, it shakes, and it roars. And it will keep on doing that whether you're in the game or out of it. So tell me, do you really think you can bend it to your will? Do you think the tape is going to change its course just because you're hoping for a quick profit? Nonsense. The best you can do, and the only thing that ever pays, is to take what the market gives. I've seen men ruin themselves because they thought they knew better. They didn't want to take what was being offered, they wanted to demand. And you don't make demands in the market. The market is bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than all of us put together. The moment you forget that, you're finished. Haven't you ever sat there, hoping for just a few more points, telling yourself it'll turn in your favor, only to watch your profits slip right through your fingers? That's what happens when you refuse to take what's given. The tape doesn't owe you another inch. It already gave you what it was willing to. You didn't take it. That's on you. When I was younger, I thought I had to be right on every move. I'd look at a stock, I'd buy it, and then I'd argue with it when it didn't act the way I thought it should. Imagine that arguing with a piece of paper and a moving set of numbers! But that's what traders do when they forget the rule. And the rule is simple: never argue with the market. You take what it gives. You buy when it shows strength. You sell when it weakens. And you never sit there trying to tell it what it should be doing. Because who are you to argue with millions of shares being bought and sold by thousands of other minds and hands? Do you think they care about your little opinion? I'll tell you a story. Back when I was running bucket shop trades, I got into a habit of pressing for the last eighth. I wanted to squeeze every drop out of every move. It felt good to think I was clever enough to catch the very top or the very bottom. But more often than not, it cost me. I'd stay too long, watching a profit shrink, sometimes flip into a loss, all because I thought I could outsmart the tape. Do you know how many fortunes have been lost that way? Too many to count. And all for the same reason: the greed of not taking what was offered in the moment. Haven't you ever done that yourself, watched a nice gain turn into nothing just because you thought you deserved more? That's the oldest mistake there is. Trading is not about what you deserve. The market doesn't pay you for working hard, or for being clever, or for wanting it badly. It pays you when you're in line with the trend, and it takes from you when you're not. That's the cold truth. So when you see an opportunity, and the market hands you a profit, don't question it. Don't delay. Take it. Because it's not about being right, it's about surviving. And survival in this game means cashing in when the tape allows it. People come to me and say, "Jesse, how do you know when to sell? How do you know when enough is enough?" And I always answer with a question of my own tee. Why do you need to know more than the market is telling you? The tape speaks, if you'll only listen. It shows strength in the way a stock rises, in the way it absorbs selling. It shows weakness in the way it hesitates, the way volume dries up, the way it can't push through resistance. All you have to do is listen and act. Haven't you noticed that every great move tells its own story on the tape? The trouble is most people want to rewrite the story. They don't like the ending, so they invent their own. That's why they lose. Now, there's another side to this taking losses. Most folks don't want to take what the market gives when it's a loss. They'll hold on hoping, praying, convincing themselves it'll come back. But what is hope in the market? Nothing but delay. Nothing but a recipe for disaster. When the market tells you you're wrong, the best thing you can do is admit it quickly and pay the price. Why? Because the price of being wrong grows the longer you wait. Do you think stocks care that you want your money back? They'll keep dropping without a second thought while you sit there paralyzed. That's why the professional doesn't argue. He cuts. He takes the loss. He lives to fight another day. Isn't it better to take a small cut now than bleed to death later? The hardest lesson for a trader is this: you're not in control. The only thing you control is your action, not the market. And once you swallow that bitter pill, things get simpler. You stop fighting. You stop forcing. You stop demanding. You learn to say, all right, the market is offering me this much, and I'll take it. It's like fishing. You don't yank on the line demanding the fish be bigger. You take the catch you've got, or you let it go and wait for the next. Otherwise, you're just splashing in the water, scaring everything away. Isn't it funny how traders, who'd never argue with a fisherman's patience, will sit there demanding the market bend to their will? Now, let's talk about the big moves. Because here's the thing: sometimes the market gives more than you expect. Much more. And if you're too quick to grab the small stuff, you'll miss the real prize. That's why it's not just about taking what's given, it's about knowing what's being given. You have to learn to distinguish between a small swing and the beginning of a major move. And when you spot the major move, you don't clip it for a few points. You sit, you wait, you ride it out. Do you know how many fortunes were built by simply sitting tight during the right trend? More than by any clever entry or fancy trick. But most people can't sit. They sell too soon because they're afraid. Are you guilty of that? Selling out of fear when the market was actually offering you a fortune. Fear and greed, those are the killers. Fear keeps you from holding when you should. Greed keeps you from selling when you must. Both make you deaf to what the market is saying. And when you're deaf to the tape, you're blind in the market. I've seen men with the best information, the sharpest minds, the most capital, all ruined because they refuse to obey that simple rule: take what's given. One more point, one more day, one more chance, always one more. But there isn't always one more. Sometimes the last tick was the last gift, and if you didn't take it, you're left with nothing. What do you think the tape cares about your reasons? You've got a family to feed. You've got debts. You've got big dreams, so what? The market doesn't know your name. It doesn't know you anything. That's why the only way to survive is discipline. Cold, hard, unfeeling discipline. You take what's offered, whether it's a profit or a loss, and you move on. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't plead, you accept. Because the market is like the ocean. You can't change the tide, but you can ride the wave if you respect it. Haven't you ever noticed that the ones who fight the sea are the ones who drown? I learned, sometimes the hard way, that the best trades are the simplest ones. When the tape says up, you buy. When it says down, you sell. And when it says nothing, you wait. That's all. The problem is, people hate to wait. They think they have to be doing something all the time. But forcing a trade is like forcing a hand in poker when the cards are against you. The pros fold. The amateurs bluff and lose. Which one do you want to be? Why not wait for the market to hand you the right setup instead of pushing your luck? Because the market always gives, but only on its own schedule. Do you see what I'm driving at? This business isn't about prediction. It's about reaction. It's not about controlling. It's about obeying. Every loss I've ever taken came from disobeying that rule. Every fortune I've ever made came from following it. Take what the market gives. Nothing more, nothing less. That's the trader's creed. And if you can't live by it, you'll soon be out of the game. Simple as that. The market owes you nothing, it only offers opportunities. You hear that, and it might sound harsh, but that's the truth of trading. Men come into the market thinking it's some kind of bank vault, ready to open for them if they just pick the right combination. They think because they've studied, or because they've suffered, or because they want it badly enough, the market will reward them. But tell me, do you think the ticker tape has sympathy for your efforts? Do you think it will move in your favor because you lost on the last trade and you deserve to win this time? Of course not. The market doesn't know you, doesn't care about you, and doesn't owe you a thing. All it does is move, and from that movement come opportunities. That's all you'll ever get, an opportunity. The rest is on you. I've seen traders ruin themselves because they thought the market was going to give them justice, as though it was some kind of judge handing out fairness. They thought that because they'd taken a beating last week, they had a right to a win this week. But that's not how it works. The market isn't a person, it's a machine made of millions of decisions. It doesn't look back and it doesn't keep score for you. If you lose, that's your problem. If you win, that's also your problem. So what makes you think it owes you anything at all? Haven't you ever found yourself saying, "I've got to make this money back"? That's the voice of a fool. The market doesn't care about your need to make it back. It'll just keep on moving, up or down, with or without you. The only time you make money is when you're on the right side of a move. That's it. That's the game. The market offers chances, and you either seize them or you don't. And seizing them doesn't mean predicting them, it means recognizing them when they come. I've seen men wait and wait for the market to pay them, as if by loyalty, while all the while opportunities slipped by right in front of their noses. Why? Because they were too busy feeling owed instead of watching the tape. They were thinking about themselves instead of thinking about the market. Isn't it curious how often a man can be staring at the truth on the ticker but blind to it because he's wrapped up in his own emotions? I learned early on that you can't argue with the tape and you can't demand from it. I was just a boy in the bucket shops, watching numbers roll by, and I thought I was clever. I thought I could always outsmart the game. When I won, I thought it proved I was right. When I lost, I thought the market had cheated me. That's the kind of thinking that destroys most beginners. The market doesn't cheat, it just is. The loss wasn't the market's doing, it was mine. The profit wasn't my brilliance, it was me being lucky enough to step in line with the opportunity being given. That's when I understood stop expecting, stop demanding, stop blaming. Start watching, start reacting, start obeying. Do you know the difference between a seasoned trader and a rookie? The rookie thinks the market owes him a living. The seasoned trader knows the market doesn't owe him so much as a nickel. The rookie comes in with big dreams, thinking the market will deliver because he's done his homework. The seasoned trader comes in humble, waiting for the market to reveal its hand. The rookie forces trades, the seasoned trader waits for the right moment. And when the moment comes, he takes it. Haven't you noticed how the market punishes the impatient more than the ignorant? The impatient ones are the first to pay tuition in the school of trading. When you accept the fact that the market owes you nothing, you stop waiting for gifts. You stop asking for guarantees. You stop demanding certainty. Instead, you look for probabilities, for hints, for patterns in the movement of prices. You learn to say, "Here's a chance the tape is giving me," and then you either take it with discipline or you pass on it. That's trading. Nothing more complicated than that. The moment you think it's about fairness or reward, you're lost. The moment you think you deserve to win because you've been losing, you're already dead. Have you ever noticed how the market is cruelest to those who need it most? That's because need blinds a man. Opportunity doesn't show itself to need, it shows itself to patience and preparation. The best trades I ever made weren't because I demanded anything. They came because I was ready when the market opened the door. I didn't knock it down, I didn't force it. I waited. And when it opened, I walked through. That's the whole secret. But most men don't have the patience. They want it now. They want it certain. They want it guaranteed. And when they don't get it, they feel betrayed. Betrayed by what? By a market that never promised them anything in the first place! Isn't it ridiculous when you think about it? To feel betrayed by something that never made you a promise. I remember once being in a position where I thought I had it all figured out. The setup looked perfect. The tape looked strong. Everything lined up. I thought, this one has to pay me. But the market doesn't have to do anything. The trade turned against me, and I sat there fuming, telling myself it was wrong, telling myself it owed me. But the more I sat, the deeper I sank. Until finally I realized the only one I was arguing with was myself. The market wasn't listening. It never does. That's when it hit me again. Every trade is just an opportunity, not a guarantee. Some pay, some don't. Your job isn't to make them pay, it's to manage them with discipline. Do you see? how different that is from thinking the market owes you. When you let go of the idea that the market owes you, a strange thing happens. You stop fighting. You stop forcing. You start to see clearly. You start to notice the little clues on the tape, the hints of strength or weakness, the signs of accumulation or distribution. You start to recognize that sometimes the best opportunity is no opportunity at all, that waiting is itself a position. But men who think they're owed can't wait. They jump in, they chase, they demand. And every demand they make is another dollar the market takes. Have you ever asked yourself how many of your losses came not from bad opportunities, but from your own impatience? The truth is, the market is the most honest thing in the world. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't make promises it won't keep. It just moves up or down, day after day. If you win, it's because you aligned yourself with the opportunity it gave. If you lose, it's because you didn't. Simple. Brutal. Honest. That's why I respect the market more than anything. It's not personal, it's not emotional, it's not political. It just is. And once you realize it owes you nothing, you stop trying to bend it and start trying to follow it. Isn't that the way it should be? So remember this, every tick on the tape is just a chance, not a promise. Every trade is an opportunity, not a gift. The market doesn't reward you for being you, it rewards you for being right in that moment. Nothing more. Nothing less. And if you can live with that truth, if you can build discipline on that truth, then you'll stop being the kind of trader who's always crying foul and start being the kind who listens, reacts, and takes what's there. Because in the end, the market doesn't owe you, never did, never will. It only offers. And the only question is, are you ready to take it when it does? Discipline means accepting the market's verdict without argument. That's a hard thing for most men to swallow, because human nature is built on argument. You argue with your neighbor, you argue with your boss, you argue with your wife, and you argue with yourself. But the moment you try to argue with the market, you're stepping into a fight you can't win. The market doesn't listen, it doesn't reason, and it doesn't care. Its verdict is final. You can like it or not like it, but you can't change it. Do you think the market will move a single tick because you disagree? Do you think it pauses and says, wait, let's see what this fellow thinks? Of course not. It moves, and you either accept it, or you pay for not accepting it. When I was young and full of fire, I thought discipline was about courage, about pressing your advantage, about staying strong in the face of uncertainty. But that wasn't discipline, that was ego. Real discipline is quieter. Real discipline is the ability to bow to the tape, to acknowledge what it's showing you, and to act on it without hesitation. You may not like what it's showing you, but your opinion doesn't count. The tape is the law. Haven't you ever noticed how the biggest losses come not from bad trades, but from refusing to obey what the market was clearly telling you? I've seen men watch a stock weaken, day after day, volume drying up, bids thinning out, and still they sit there, saying it'll come back. It has to. Why does it have to? Because they bought it. That's the only reason. They mistake their own position for the truth. But the market doesn't care that they bought it. It doesn't care about their cost basis, or their plans, or their hopes. The verdict is in, and the stock is weak. Discipline is cutting it. Discipline is saying, the tape has spoken. But how many have the stomach to do that? How many prefer to keep arguing until they're cleaned out? One of the reasons most traders fail is because they let their emotions sit in the chair where discipline should be. They confuse hope with a strategy and fear with caution. Hope whispers, hold a little longer, it'll turn around. Fear whispers, sell too soon, before you lose what little you've gained. But discipline says, follow the tape, nothing else. And when discipline rules, hope and fear don't matter. Do you see how different that is? One is wishful thinking, the other is mechanical obedience to the truth that's in front of you. I learned discipline the hard way. I can still remember one trade that nearly broke me. I was in heavy, convinced I had the move pegged. Every sign I thought mattered was in my favor, at least in my mind. But the market didn't see it that way. The stock stalled, then slipped, then dropped hard. Instead of cutting, I argued. I told myself it would bounce. I told myself I couldn't be wrong. Every point down, I told myself it was temporary. You know what happened. It didn't bounce. It didn't come back. It didn't care. It just kept falling until my position was a wreck. That was the day I learned the market's verdict is absolute. If you can't take it, you shouldn't be in the game. Have you ever sat there, watching the screen, telling yourself lies, while the truth was staring right back at you? Discipline is the difference between staying in the game and washing out. It's not your intelligence that saves you. It's not your predictions. It's your obedience to the tape. The cleverest man in the world can lose everything if he won't listen to the verdict, and the simplest fellow can make a fortune if he just learns to obey. That's the irony. People think trading is about brilliance, but it isn't. It's about control. Control of yourself, control of your actions, control of your tongue when it wants to argue. Can you imagine how many fortunes were lost not because the man didn't know enough, but because he couldn't control himself enough to act when he should? You can't argue with a stock any more than you can argue with the weather. If it rains, you get wet. If the stock drops, you lose. That's all there is to it. But discipline is carrying an umbrella when the sky darkens. Discipline is cutting when the stock weakens. It sounds so simple, yet it's the hardest thing for most people to do. They want to be right more than they want to survive. But this game doesn't pay you for being right. It pays you for being aligned. And alignment comes from discipline, not from stubbornness. Haven't you noticed that the market doesn't punish mistakes nearly as much as it punishes defiance? The market's verdict is the only jury that counts. You can argue in your head, you can argue with your broker, you can argue with your friends, but the ticker tells the truth in numbers, and those numbers are the judge, jury, and executioner. And what do most traders do? They stall, they delay, they try to negotiate with themselves. They say, I'll give it one more day. They say, if it gets back to my price, I'll sell. But the tape has already spoken, and while they're bargaining, the loss grows. Isn't it strange how people would rather carry a growing loss than accept a small cut? Every time you hesitate, every time you argue, every time you delay, you're stepping out of discipline and into danger. Discipline is immediate. The verdict comes down, and you obey it. No questions, no debates, no second chances. That's what saves you. That's what keeps your capital intact for the next opportunity. Because remember, the market doesn't just take, it also gives. But you can't take advantage of what it gives tomorrow if you've ruined yourself by refusing today's verdict. That's why discipline isn't just about this trade, it's about every trade you'll ever make. Do you see how your future depends on the discipline you show right now? I've known traders who had every advantage capital, connections, even inside tips, and they still failed. Do you know why? Because they couldn't take the verdict. They always thought they knew better. They'd get tips and think they had the edge, but when the tape contradicted the tip, they ignored it. They believed the tip, not the tape, and the tape punished them. Meanwhile, a trader with no tips, no advantages, no special insight, but with iron discipline survived and thrived. Which would you rather be? The clever man who dies broke, or the disciplined man who lives rich? Discipline isn't glamorous. It doesn't feel good in the moment. It feels like cutting off your own arm sometimes. But it saves your life. It saves your capital. It keeps you in the chair. And in this game, staying in the chair is the whole secret. Because the market will always give more chances. But it won't hand them to the man who lost his stake arguing against the last verdict. Discipline is the price you pay for the privilege of being there when the next opportunity shows itself. Without it, you're gone, and once you're gone, the game moves on without you. Haven't you ever noticed how quickly the market forgets the men who lost everything fighting it? So understand this, the verdict is final. The tape is never wrong. Your job is not to argue, not to question, not to negotiate. Your job is to obey. That's what discipline is. It's not about pride, it's not about being right, it's about survival. And survival is the only path to success in this business. The moment you argue, the moment you let your ego speak louder than the tape, You've signed your own death warrant. The verdict has been read. The only question is, will you accept it? Fear makes you sell too soon. Greed makes you hold too long. That's the whole story of why most men lose in the market. They think it's about knowledge. They think it's about systems. They think it's about inside information. It's not. It's about controlling those two emotions that run wild the moment you put real money on the line. Fear and greed, those are the two tyrants that make traders betray themselves. And unless you learn how to recognize them, unless you learn how to chain them down, you'll find yourself doing exactly the opposite of what the tape is telling you. Haven't you ever noticed how the hardest thing to do is often the right thing, and the easiest thing to do is often the wrong one? That's fear and greed at work. Fear is a tricky enemy because it sneaks up on you when you're in profit. Most men think fear comes when they're losing, but the more dangerous fear comes when they're winning. You buy a stock, it starts to rise, you see the points piling up, and instead of confidence you feel a knot in your stomach. You start thinking, what if it turns? What if I lose what I've made? And so you sell too soon, you clip your profit, and you step aside. Then you sit there and watch the stock keep climbing without you, ticking higher and higher until the profit you cut short looks like a joke. That's fear robbing you. The tape was telling you to stay, the strength was there, but you couldn't stomach the thought of giving back a little to make a lot. Do you see how fear blinds you to the bigger move? I remember a trade where I bought into strength, and it started running almost at once. I was ahead by 5 points before I had time to think. The voice of fear started shouting, take it, you'll lose it if you don't. But I forced myself to look at the tape, not my nerves. The tape showed strength. The volume was there, the action was clean, the resistance was breaking. Everything said stay. So I stayed. That stock doubled before I got out. If I had listened to fear, I would have taken crumbs instead of a feast. And I've done the opposite to listen to fear, sold too soon, and watched what could have been a fortune sail right past me. Haven't you? Greed, on the other hand, is the mirror image. Greed whispers when you're already ahead, but it tells you the opposite of fear. Instead of urging you to take profits too early, it tells you to hang on too long. You're watching a stock rise. You've made a solid gain, but greed whispers, don't sell now. One more point, one more day. You can get it all if you just wait. And so you sit there, ignoring the signs of weakness, ignoring the tape telling you the move is over. Then it turns, and your profit starts shrinking. Instead of taking what was given, you're watching it slip away, still holding because greed insists there must be more. Before long, you're lucky to get out even, or worse, you're in a loss. That's greed robbing you, just as fear does, but from the other side. I can't count how many times I've seen traders ruined by greed. A man builds a fortune in a big bull move, but he won't cash in. He keeps pressing, keeps holding, keeps demanding just a little more. The bull ends, the bear starts, and all those paper profits vanish. He thought the market owed him more, and greed kept him blind to the signs. That's why I always said, you don't sell because you want to, you sell because the tape tells you to. If the market is showing strength, you stay, even if your nerves scream. If the market is showing weakness, you sell, even if your greed says hold on. Have you noticed that the hardest thing is to obey the tape instead of those two voices? Fear and greed aren't just enemies, they're twins. They work together to destroy you. Fear cuts your winners short. Greed stretches your losers long. Between the two, they grind you down until you're nothing but tired and broke. And the market doesn't have to beat you if you're already beating yourself. Most men don't lose because the market tricked them. They lose because they let fear and greed make their decisions. And the cruelest part is they don't even notice it happening. They think they're being cautious or ambitious, when really they're just being weak. Haven't you ever excused yourself that way, calling fear prudence or greed patience? Discipline is the only cure. You have to replace emotion with obedience. The tape is your only judge. If the tape says strength, you don't sell just because fear wants you to. If the tape says weakness, you don't hold just because greed wants more. You listen, you obey, you act. Nothing else. It's mechanical, it's cold, it's hard, but it's the only way. Because the moment you let yourself feel too much, the moment you listen to those whispers, you're no longer trading the market, you're trading your emotions. And your emotions are terrible traders. One of the cruel tricks of fear and greed is how they strike at different times for different people. Some men are naturally fearful, they never let profits run, always clipping too soon. Others are naturally greedy, they never admit defeat, always holding losses until they grow. And some are cursed with both, bouncing between fear and greed like a ship in a storm. Those men never stand a chance unless they learn to chain those emotions. I've seen men who could call the market right, but still go broke, simply because their temperament let fear or greed rule them. Isn't it strange how often the right idea is ruined by the wrong emotion? Think about your own trades. How many times did you get in right, only to get out wrong? How many times did you sell a stock that kept climbing, or hold a stock that kept falling? The entry wasn't the problem. Your analysis wasn't the problem. Fear and greed were the problem.